very excited to see everybody here this morning. We have representation from government, we have companies, we have youth, we have community organizations. It's always been a dream of mine to put everybody in one room and start looking at some of the issues that we're going to be talking today. And I think that's where we came up with the title of Youth Unemployment, It's Everybody's Issue. So I'm really looking forward to the day ahead of us. But I'd like to start the day by introducing one of our board of directors at YES, Shireen.
Thank you, Iris. Bonjour, mesdames et messieurs. C'est vraiment un grand plaisir pour moi d'être ici. I would also like to thank Canadian Heritage for their sponsorship, and we do have a representative today with us, Valérie Girard. Thank you so much for supporting the event. And you know, today is the opening of this important dialogue, and I really hope it will continue, that it's not going to stop here. There's always ways to keep this discussion going. Thank you, and have a wonderful day.
My hope especially, and our hope for YES, is that these conversations happen today, but that not only the conversations, but that we end up with recommendations. And we have representatives here from all the different sectors that are implicated. We have education, media is here, we didn't mention, but we've got several people from media here, government. These are some of the decision makers and people who can take these issues back. And I'm making a promise to everybody in this room that these recommendations are not going to be sitting on a shelf or on some website somewhere. We're going to get out there and get that word out there. So I really want to make sure your voices are heard. There's going to be different opinions on things, and as long as we all respect each other's opinions, I think we'll do fine. But it's really important that everybody has an opportunity to get their voice heard and come up with solutions. It's not so much about talking about the same issues, but I hope that this is different in that we can make some recommendations and have some solutions to bring back to the decision makers, because it is everybody's issue. So we were seeing some of these patterns around the youth unemployment, whether it was happening in Montreal or out in the regions. And again, the region's reality is totally different. We want to make sure they're represented here today. So we're going to be videotaping this whole day and sending it out to the regions with some questionnaires and getting their input. So we did this video. We decided we were going to do a video and hear the voices of employers and youth. We said, all right, let's hear it from them. So we put up a booth at YES, and people were able to go in there and talk about their experience. We also had iPads that went out to the regions, and through our partners, they went and interviewed people in the regions and got feedback from their experience. So we put together a video. We had a screening at the Scotia Centre. We had about 100 people show up. We had a really small panel discussion, and we realized that people really want to talk about it. And so we thought the next step is, we're talking about it, everybody's talking about it, let's do something about it. And so we came up with this idea to put everybody in the room together and take the conversation a step further and look at recommendations. Thank you all for coming today. I'd like to bring on our first presenter for the day. Jack is sort of the guru in numbers and statistics and gives us all the ammunition we need to do our jobs and to make the case for what we do.
Let me proceed with the presentation. So this is just some basic highlights from the 2016 census. That, again, this was released last week on Wednesday. The employment rate for youth aged 15 to 24 fell from 57.2% in 2006 to 51.9% in 2016. Young men were less likely to work than their female counterparts in 2016, just as they were in 2006. This is in general for Canada, by the way. We're going to get to Quebec/Montreal in a moment. The employment rate among young men fell 6.1 percentage points to 50.7% over this period, while it fell 4.4 percentage points to 53.1% among young women. The overall employment rate for youth was highest in Quebec, 54.8%, and Alberta, 54.4%. That's the overall employment rate for youth, not unemployment. Amongst the provinces and territories, young men in Yukon were most likely to work, while young women in Quebec were most likely to work. The youth employment rate was lowest in Nunavut and Newfoundland and Labrador, 42.8%. The percentage of youth aged 15 to 24 working full-time also declined, falling from 13.8% in 2005 to 11.5% in 2015. Statistics Canada suggests part of the decline was associated with social and economic factors such as increased school attendance and delayed entry into the labor market compared with previous generations, though work activity decreased for both those who reported attending school as well as those who did not. Again, amongst youth aged 15 to 24 attending school, the proportion who worked part-time, part-year, and or part-time also fell between 05 and 15, down 4.4 percentage points to 56.3. The proportion of this group which did not work at all increased by 5.8 points over the same period. And finally, the part-year and or part-time employment rate amongst those who did not attend school was similar between 05 and 15. So education. So people, we're seeing changes in the nature of work and the way people engage with the workplace, right, is sort of if I may summarize some of the things you're seeing. And the relationship between education or schooling and entry into the workplace is also changing, as has, we've seen over now several generations, the place of women in the workforce, right, relative to the place of men, thankfully, right? I think we would all agree those are welcome changes. And there's still more work to be done in that area in terms of ensuring greater equity. But I still think, and we are, one of the key issues, particularly amongst youth, is that relationship between time at school and entry into the workplace, right? And where people draw the line or strike the balance between the two, what prompts you to continue to pursue education, and the perceptions around whether you can match the skills and your aspirations relative to work against the level of education and type of education that you've secured over that period. The census can tell us a fair bit about which areas in terms of securing education are most beneficial in terms of gainful employment. And then there's, of course, a secondary issue. There's the issue of securing employment, and then there's the issue of whether the income that you'll secure is consistent with your needs and your aspirations, right? Those are not always connected issues, right, as the census suggests. But let's look a bit more at the broader highlights from Statistics Canada before we get into some of the more detailed data itself. So here are the education highlights from Statistics Canada, again issued last Wednesday. Young graduates with bachelor's degree in fields such as nursing, engineering, education and teaching, and computer information science are more likely than other graduates to find work closely related to their studies. Right? Given Canada's aging population, individuals with healthcare skills are increasingly important to the labor market. Women comprise the majority in health fields, including nursing, medicine, and health diagnostic and treatment-related professions. They give you some examples of that. Most women with degrees or diplomas in these fields do find work that match their studies. Clearly, the health field is an important field. We're seeing, continued aging of the population, as we know, and people have been living longer in general. To live longer, generally they'll require more medical treatment, more drugs, right, for a lot of people, and so pharmaceutical industries are doing well. So young bachelor's degree holders in engineering, computer science, and computer and information science were very likely to bring their qualifications to where they needed in the labor market, as 7 in 10 worked in science technology occupations. By contrast, young graduates in biological sciences tended to work in fields other than science and technology. Right? So not all science and technology related degrees necessarily lead you to work that's associated with the area that you seek or desire. Young bachelor's degree holders in the arts and humanities and social behavioral sciences were more likely than other young graduates with bachelor's degrees to work in jobs typically requiring a high school education at most. So bachelor's degree holders working in such jobs are classified as being overqualified. And it's fair to say, as you're going to see in some of the other slides, that arts and social science and humanities are the areas where right now opportunities to find employment consistent with those degrees very specifically aren't as strong as is the case in some of the other areas, which, if you're in the place I'm in, which is teaching in those particular fields, I'm very mindful of, and I look very closely at what type of skill enhancements are needed to assist students in terms of securing employment going forward. Plus, I'll need some people who can crunch those numbers, so I won't have to get up at these ungodly hours to do these interviews. Now, here's what Statistics Canada is calling the overqualification rate amongst women aged 25 to 34 with a bachelor's degree as their highest qualification by selected fields. And basically, it's showing you that the highest rate of overqualification is in the arts and humanities, right? So our overqualification is defined, as you can see in the footnote below if you can read it, as a person is considered overqualified when he or she has completed a university degree but is working in an occupation that typically requires a high school education at most. in this article, all our graduates have a bachelor's degree as their highest level of education completed. So what they don't show you is the apprenticeship issues, because that'd be more men are disproportionately doing those apprentice or trade certificates, which actually in Quebec are very strong in terms of the matching of the particular trade you've studied with employment, and from an income standpoint, they've been reasonably good compared to what was offered in previous years. So that's why you're seeing this big trend, very present in Quebec, more so than other provinces, where a lot of younger men are pursuing those apprenticeship or trade certificates as opposed to pursuing bachelor's or undergraduate or even sometimes CSHEP degrees. So here's a survey that we commissioned actually for Youth Employment Services. 62% of persons interviewed, and you can see 75%, 18 to 24 years of age, agree that my specific area of education training were essential to my current job. These are people who are employed. 33% strongly agree, and 29% somewhat agree. And the pattern basically, as you can see it here, is that seems to be more the case amongst people 18 to 24 than it is amongst the higher age cohorts, right? So you get to 55 to 64, 53% of people think that or agree that their specific area education training are essential to the current employment. So these are unemployment rates, actually, with people with bachelor's degrees in these particular areas, right? This is just some numbers that I crunched quite quickly. What you need to look is the figures on your right, which are the unemployment figures for people holding bachelor's degrees, right, or better, for Montreal. And you can see that the sort of lowest unemployment rate, these are for the lowest unemployment rates, is in the field of education, 2.6%. So the suggestion is there's a high need for educators, right, if that's the rate that you're seeing. Parks, recreation, leisure, and fitness studies, 2.9%. These are for fields of study. Service technologies, psychology, dental, medical, veterinary and residency programs, health and related fields, gerontology, biological and biomedical sciences, computer and information sciences, mechanic and repair technologies, public administration and social service professions. So these are the ones that are holding the lowest, some of the lowest unemployment rates, right? Not as discouraging as some people may think for certain fields, by the way. So this is Montreal. Back to the sort of survey data. So we're working from the sort of big data set and giving you some of that information, and moving towards some of what the survey data tells us. So here are some of the barriers that people identify when asked what problems they're encountering in the workplace in terms of securing employment or in terms of the current employment. Please identify any barriers you've experienced. Most common is a language barrier. A number of people said, I'm not bilingual, I don't speak French. Right? So we do know that for a number of Anglophones surveyed, at least, that's a reasonably common issue that they're citing in terms of barriers. Favoritism is another concern that's expressed by people in terms of their situation in the workplace or job searches. Insufficient level of schooling or the value of their specific degree in the job market. Another one, no advancement opportunities in my workplace, and the size of the company they work in may, be a factor contributing to advancement or lack of advancement opportunities in the workplace. One's family situation may be another obstacle. These are all the things that people are citing as potential barriers. Oh, favoritism, that came up twice, sorry about that. Gender discrimination, another issue that some people evoked in terms of problems they're encountering in the workplace. Lack of experience, and related to that, lack of seniority. So these are some of the main things that people are identifying in terms of barriers they're encountering, either in the workplace itself or in terms of securing work. Now, what are the 6 best ways to find your next job according to Forbes magazine? Number 6, contact headhunters. Now that's not going to apply to everybody clearly. This is Forbes, right? So I gave you Forbes order for a purpose. You're going to understand the purpose shortly, but these aren't things that will apply to people who are, at the entry stage of, or somewhere just after the entry stage in terms of pursuing employment opportunities. Check job boards. You got a job board, Iris, right? So check job boards. Now, I wouldn't just check job boards at Yes. I check as many job boards, of course, you can, but this is what Forbes is suggesting, and they're reasonably respected, I think, outfit Forbes, right? So many companies and recruiters use them to find the right candidate, to find the top job boards for your skill set and put your resume there. Use LinkedIn to maximum effect. Right? So LinkedIn is a powerful tool to easily connect with the right people, search your target market based on your industry qualifications, university and interests, and connect with the people who interest you. Attend events. That's number 3. These include hosted by charities and professional organizations. Talk to at least one person at every meeting who you haven't met. Number 2, connect with alumni. Like, I'm not, clear which alumni they're referring to here, but this is Forbes. I presume they're referring to the university alumni, but I would sort of, if I were writing to Forbes, I would connect that to number 3, frankly, right? Attend events, basically, and, be out there and make as many contacts and connections as you can. And number 1, tap your network, right? Everyone knows somebody within your existing network. There are probably 3 jobs that you could would be appropriate for you, but the people who could help open doors to those jobs just haven't thought of you. Make a list of everyone you know. Set a goal to touch base with 3 people you have not talked to for a year or more. Meet one of them for coffee or lunch. Identify the 25 most influential people in your network and brainstorm ways to strengthen your relationship with each. When we go back again, attend events, connected to tap your network. These are just things that I think in today's environment are increasingly important, right? Especially if you're in some of the degree areas that appear based on current market, market demands to be more challenging, right? Then we get into this issue of mentoring. Now, I apologize, because I know my specific topic today wasn't going to be mentoring, but I, along with some of my colleagues at the association, have been involved in a series of mentoring projects that we were invited to do by my good friend Iris, right, from Youth Employment Services. And frankly, over the course of doing those projects, I've become increasingly convinced that mentoring and coaching is an extremely important avenue for maximizing your prospects for securing employment, and even in employment situations where you are currently employed, it remains a very important avenue for improving and bettering your chances for advancement. So being more engaged. It's the advice I give my own children, frankly. I've told my daughter that she can have more than one mentor. Right? If you're looking for coaching, you can have more than one coach. And in fact, if you can have 5 coaches, that's a very good thing. Just don't put them all together at the same time if you've told one of them they're your only mentor or only coach. 61% report there's no mentor at my place of work, but it doesn't matter because there's such a thing as external mentors, right, that you can pursue as well. And you can see disproportionately more younger people have mentors. That makes some sense, but mentoring and one-to-one types of relationships are extremely important, I would suggest, in this market in particular. Majority of young people have had mentorship training. Have you ever participated in any formal or mentee training? 29% say yes, 66% no. Young people, as you can see, inverse that trend. 58% say yes, 37% say no, compared to people at the upper age cohorts who probably don't think they require mentoring at that stage. 21% yes, 78% no. And networking is particularly important at your place of work. I network, build a social network to achieve goals effectively at my place of work. Right? So much more that's much more likely amongst the younger cohort, 18 to 24. 77% say they're doing that. So examples of what mentorship provides. My mentor often and sometimes provides with constructive feedback about my performance at work. Again, these are for people at work. Works with me to establish career goals. Builds my confidence at work. Helps me network effectively. Is available to me when I need support. Right? So these are some of the things that mentorship can provide. Again, we're looking at people, in this case, in the workplace, but even if you're not in the workplace and you're looking for work, mentorship and a network is extremely important. So that's basically where I stop. Again, try to share with you some of the data you're seeing and talk specifically about mentoring, but I'm open to answering various questions. With that said, right, if there are any comments or questions, I'd be more than pleased to do my best to try to answer them.
Discrimination comes up a lot,
Yeah.
right? Minorities of all kinds face barriers of a much more significant kind than those who don't have the barriers.
Agreed.
Is there any examples of jurisdictions that have acknowledged that gap and actually successfully tried to address it? Do we have any, in Canada or outside of Canada, any models that we might draw from in terms of reducing some of the the problems, employment problems associated specifically with that issue?
I think that Toronto has done a bit better than some other jurisdictions in trying to address some of these models in some parts of the, some sectors, not in all sectors. And I believe there are other jurisdictions as well. Now, you know, Toronto's got more diversity to address, as there's more pressure exerted from the composition of the population on the authorities in Ontario to affect changes with respect to, you know, the presence, for example, of visible minorities in the workplace. I don't think, you know, it's a secret to say that Quebec has been very challenged by this, and that, you know, whether it's in the civil service in Quebec or, you know, in other places in the province. But, you know, I think there's a need to look more at Toronto. And there are also some cities in the United States, despite some very serious gaps in the United States, particularly on the issue of what we describe as visible minorities. But even in the data here that I've looked at last week, and that I think is something that, without sort of not answering your question directly, explains why we've had high levels of interprovincial losses from migration with other provinces, even though in theory and in practice, a lot of the economic indicators have been very good in the past 5 years compared to the previous period, which was highlighted by a recession, is because a lot of the benefits of the economy are uneven, right? So that there are a lot of segments of the population, even if the economy in general is doing well, that are not benefiting from the economic gains, and that may be a driver, particularly for people 25 to 34, who are disproportionately the larger group that are leaving, in terms of moving or seeking, you know, better opportunities or conditions, because, you know, our degree of addressing these issues of inclusion in Quebec isn't as good. Now, having said that, a lot of francophones left as well, to be fair, relative to the previous periods. So I think a lot of those people who are disproportionately choosing Alberta are attracted by higher incomes and lower taxes and the boom, which is now not a boom, that took place in Alberta. So this is what you need to think about from a communication standpoint. But I will say this to peel back a bit to on what Jim said. In a previous study, which I'd love to replicate, Iris, that I did for you in 2007, which badly needs to be replicated. Right? The one we probably distributed more copies of that study than any other. When people were asked where their best opportunity was to secure employment, right? Was it the job boards? Was it the Emploi Quebec? Was it these various things? 70% said it was family and friends. Now, to get back to Jim's point, right, for a second, segue back, the family and friends issue has has a positive and less positive dimension to it, right? Very often people, I noticed in the survey work we did, were replicating the networks that they had with the type of jobs they secured. So the stronger and more, if you like, connected their network was, the better employment they could secure. But the weaker their network was, the weaker the type of employment they could secure was if they went through family and friends. You know, but that's why I think it speaks to the broader issue of coaching and mentoring beyond the family and friends issue, in terms of where people see they can build on opportunities. You know, again, inside that family and friends issue is a sort of microcosm of one of the issues you're raising, right? Because there is a risk of discrimination built into who your network is, right? And that's where I think Quebec has been very challenged. So it's not just in Quebec's case the tax cuts, which I think a lot of people in certain segments of the economy, particularly the middle class, will welcome, right, and the higher upper class will welcome them. It's also trying to address those issues of inclusion more successfully, and that will require much more pressure from the population. But, you know, youth can be very empowered, and Quebec right now is very sensitive to trying to ensure maximum opportunities for young people, particularly when they see the migration numbers, which I released yesterday. I'll just quickly answer Iris's question. Yes. So Statistics Canada did release last week a number of, as I said at the outset, figures on various issues from the census, 2000-2016. They particularly went big in their comms department on language of work, right, which some of you may have noticed, hence we now have the Bonjour Hi thing. They also released several other, but mysteriously, they did not release an analysis of the interprovincial migration figures, even though they made them available to people through the kind of corner of the website, if you know how to play with those numbers. So I saw them and I crunched them and I released them. They weren't very good for Quebec, actually. Quebec incurred a net loss on the basis of interprovincial migration for the period 2011-2016 of 36,955 people, right? Or 37,000 for, if we want to round that out. And in the previous 5-year period, 06 to 011, there was net loss of 20,000, I think it was 20,225 people. And then there's the 01 to 06 period where the net loss was 10,000 and change, right? So you're seeing significant increases in net losses over each this quinquennial period, 5-year period, from 2001 to 2016. The net loss, that was 92,000 people left, 55,000 people came here, but a lot fewer allophones came here, which was interesting.